What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Let's Talk Civilly podcast. I'm your host, Cleveland Horton, the Executive Director of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. As we think about our episode today during Black History Month, it's important for us to just take a pause and remember the late, the great Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., right? If it was not for him, many of the civil rights that we see today, many of the individuals and civil rights leaders that we have today would not be in those positions. So it's important for me as the head of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights to honor, pay homage to, and acknowledge the passing of the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. So I do ask everyone by the sound of my voice just to take a moment, whether it's today, whether it's during this podcast, whether it's tomorrow, next week, just take a moment to reflect and remember on the great work and the legacy of the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And with that, I'll pass it off to my co-host, Marquita.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Civilly. My name's Marquita Surratt and I will be one of your co-hosts today. I'm also the one of the Education and Outreach Associates here at the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And I'll pass it over to my other co-host, Gabby.
Hey everyone, I'm back. We're back for another episode of Let's Talk Civilly. I'm very excited. This is episode number 2 of many. I am here with Cleveland and Marquita, and we're going to definitely dive into a lot of things on this podcast. We're diving into Black History Month, while we're also going to recap our symposium that we just had over the weekend. So I'm very excited to finally get into some dialogue with my other co-hosts today. Awesome. So with that being said, y'all, let's go ahead and start. Cleveland.
So Gabby brought up our Protecting Civil Rights During Challenging Times Symposium,
Yes.
right? Great event, great turnout. It's just a powerful day of dialogue, of unity, of collaboration, transparency, urgency. Looking back on that day, it's interesting for me to hear from both of you all in reference to what was your biggest takeaways from the event.
So I'm going to start on that one, actually.
Okay, you got
Because I just, want to go off of Cleveland, what he was saying. So we actually had it at Bowie State University, which was so much fun. It was a lot. It was a great turnout. I think a lot of people enjoyed the food. Everyone was talking about
I heard
chicken.
lunch was amazing.
Yes. I ate like probably 5 sugar cookies, honestly. Like those sugar cookies were amazing. I know
Was that before or after you started counting?
I know I ate like 3 because I put 3 on my plate, and I was like, ooh. And then other people started being like, you want my cookie? And I was like, yeah.
Okay.
You don't even got to ask me.
You don't need to rub it in.
Oh, yeah.
No more.
It was really good though. I enjoyed too many cookies, but we were at Bowie State University, and that was a lot of fun. Interacting with a lot of the students that we had there as volunteers, it was great. And we had panels for the whole day. I liked what and I know I'm kind of jumping a little bit, but we had Brian Sims as one of our panelists from Associated Black Charities, and we interviewed him on our reel, which we'll be posting on our Instagram as well. And he said something that I was like, that's such a good point. He was just saying, like, we were here on a Saturday all day. It was actually really nice weather. Like, it was sunny. But we had people who were invested in learning more about civil rights and learning more about MCCR and things like that, and actually, like, stayed. And, that's where they chose to spend their Saturday. And I was like, that's such a good point. Like, I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah.
And it just makes you think about, like, how many dedicated people we have in the community who are, like, really ready to learn more, come up with solutions and figure out how we can bridge a lot of these gaps that we have. And so I will say that was one of the biggest takeaways, even from Brian's takeaway.
Right.
And I really, I know we had a local enforcement panel, we had a legal panel, and then we had our advocacy panel, which all panels were great. I really loved the legal panel, which was moderated by our girl, Miss Glendora. And
Shout out Glendora Hughes, General Counsel of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights.
Shout out to Miss G.
The giant of civil rights.
Yes.
Our giant of civil rights.
For sure. And I know that she was, and we had Miss Kristen Downs, and she had just such a great story about like why she came into the legal field, and just again, being able to connect your story and like why she chose what she chose, or as her career. I don't know. I love things like that. I love hearing people's backgrounds. So for me, I think that was also so much fun hearing that end. What about you,
I love
Marquita?
that. Mine's kind of similar. So, planning an event, especially an event that large, you sometimes get so focused in the logistics and the run of show, and you're making sure that everyone is okay, your panelists are ready, and your vendors, or like we called them, our civic engagement vendors, are tabling and they're okay, and our volunteers, right? So my mind all day was so set on that I feel like I didn't really get to sit and take in the symposium like I wanted. However, there was one moment where I was standing in the back in the corner. I was standing all day. I don't know why I'm referencing like I wasn't standing all day. I was standing in the back in the corner, and I got really emotional just looking around at all of the chairs that were filled, right? Like we had 180 people there. That
Right.
was amazing. But then thinking like our country is under so many attacks. So many barriers have been like just shooting up out of nowhere for our community. And these people have taken time out of their day, like you were saying, Gabby, to not only learn and grow, but they're eager. Like they want the resources. And we were at an event today over with Enoch Pratt Library, and someone said like it's not always about if you know it or if you're uneducated, but it's about your commitment to it. And I feel like that's exactly what we saw in that room last weekend was people's commitment not only to the work, but showing up for their community and wanting their community to be better, and like how can they be an advocate in that, but also gaining resources. Our panelists were amazing. Yeah, I think those would be my biggest takeaway from the event, other than running around like crazy trying to make sure everyone else was okay.
Right. What about you, Cleveland?
Well, I
You were
think
in there all day,
all
and you were one of
day,
the moderators,
all
actually.
day,
And
all
he was
day.
our opening
Yes.
and our closing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Grand opening, grand closing. Right. So I think for me, it's always hard. Anytime you ask me to give like one biggest takeaway, folks know I'm never gonna give just one answer.
We'll give
Right.
us multiple.
For those who don't know, get to know me. Right. I'm going to give you multiple answers. So for me, thinking about it, the first thing that stuck out to me about the symposium was just the acknowledgement and the understanding that we are at a very pivotal moment in civil rights, right? It's one thing that many of us, just based off of age, right, when we hear about civil rights, right, we've just learned about it. Most of us haven't been directly impacted by it on a regular day-to-day basis, right? So for me to see what we're going through right now, for many folks, is like an eye opener. Like, oh, this must have been somewhat of what it was like before, right? When you hear the stories of MLK and Rosa Parks, when you hear the story about the Selma marches and stuff like that, right? It's hard for folks to conceptualize that in real time because we think that we're in 2026, and many of the things that folks were fighting for before us don't exist anymore, right? But if one thing that 2026 has taught us is that we are living in a society that maybe hasn't progressed as much as we tend to believe it has at times, right? And it is making lived experience for so many people, is putting it on doorsteps of many people that otherwise would not understand it or believe that it still exists, right? And I think for me, the symposium and listening to the stories, hearing the work of many of the different agencies is putting the cries for help that people have been doing for years, right? It is helping other folks understand that and see what folks have been saying for a very long time, right? I think another thing that was important about the symposium was around collaboration, right? That in this moment, we can't be isolated. We can no longer stay in our silos working on our own private agendas and expect to have significant impact, right? When you think about the civil rights movement, of just from a history standpoint, it was done so in a more collaborative, consolidated way where there wasn't 100 different agendas.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the symposium brought together different agencies, different organizations, different people to be able to network and figure out how do we collaborate at a much higher level. Right. It's less about what the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights is doing individually. It's more about how do we convene people to create impact on the community level, right? How are we impacting community? It doesn't mean that our name has to be in the headlights all the time, right? It doesn't mean that we have to get the credit, but it means as though we can be a better convener of individuals to get the work done. Because at the end of the day, it is about getting the work done and not getting the credit for the work. So I think for me, that was a big part of the symposium. I think trust was another big thing, right? We know that we are currently in an environment where trust is at an all-time low, right? For a variety of different reasons, impacting different communities in different ways, right? Whether it's the ICE raids, whether it's the continued loss of life of Black and brown individuals at the hand of the police, right? Our communities are just dealing with a significant trust issue, right? Which I also thought was kind of brought to the forefront of the symposium too. And how do we build that trust back, right? As a civil rights agency, what are our priorities to figure out what can we do to be a bridge builder when we think about trust and trust in the community, and how do we get the community to trust us that we're here to help them, right? So I think that that was an important takeaway for me as well. And I think lastly for me is really about lived experience has to drive strategy, right? That we can no longer really sit in our offices and say, this is what people need, right? This is what we think the people want, right? These are the topics that people want to hear about. These are the speakers that people want to hear from, right? It's important for us as agencies and as organizations to be out in the community, talking to people, listening to their lived experiences, hearing what the people want, what the people need, and providing them that. So I think those for me were the main takeaways of the symposium.
Yeah, I love that last part about hearing what the people need and not assuming what they may need or want. When I was first hired, I pitched the whole meet the people where they're at type of marketing. And I want us to, be on the metro. I want to be on the buses. I want to go knocking on doors and like talking to the community about what they need. And someone actually said that at the symposium. And I was like, oh, look at that. Like we are all, again, like on the same agenda or strategy, but we can't do it alone. Right. And it's not about like who's getting the credit. It's about how are we making a greater impact, and we do that together, not alone.
Yeah, I think it was said at the symposium. I think it was someone from the advocacy panel actually.
Yeah.
And speaking of the advocacy panel, I think I already touched on it, but I think I loved the kind of like diversity that we had on the advocacy panel about like what was, part of advocacy. We had Free State Justice there. We had Susie from Equal Rights Center there. And then we had
ACLU.
Yes. And then we had Miss Dominique there who had flow therapy, which I thought was great. Again, to kind of, bring that mental health aspect to our panel. And we had Sonia Lynn from the Immigrants Office.
The Governor's Office of Community Initiatives.
Yes. Yeah. So we had such a diverse panel, or panels, let me say.
Yes.
On our symposium. And I think it was such a good way to kind of connect, like, different, like, like you said, silos together, again, to just talk about civil rights, period, but, like, maybe in a different, form or way. But with that being said, Cleveland, you've been a vocal advocate for systemic change. So how do you feel the energy from our symposium translates into the work we're doing right now in Maryland?
So I think one of the questions I get from a lot of people are, why am I trying to do so much? Right? And I think that for me, just taking a look at the energy from the symposium, for me, really affirmed the urgency and the level of work that we're doing, right? Because our communities right now are in need, right? Folks are looking for organizations. Folks are looking for individuals. Folks are looking for something or someone to fill a gap, right? To make folks feel rest assured that help is still here, right? That there's still a level of humanity that exists within our communities, right? So for me, taking a look at, I know Marquita mentioned the 180 people that we had, right? Taking a look at that we had 180 people that could have been anywhere on a Saturday, right?
On a Sunday.
But they chose to be at the symposium, right? Especially after we had all that snow and ice before, and we were predicted to have more snow
on
the
Sunday.
Next day, right? And those folks were still there, committed to what we were talking about, right? So for me, it really does affirm the urgency and the work that we're doing, right? And for me, it again highlights, one of the things that I talked about during my opening remarks is that the work that we do is not our work alone, right? Is that this work was started by generations before us, right? By folks who didn't know our names, folks didn't know that we would ever exist, right? Folks had no direct connection to us. But what they knew and were committed to was making the world a better place for us by any means necessary, right? They gave up their sweat, they gave up their blood, and many folks gave up their lives, right? White people, black people, young people, old people, male, female, right? All people who were committed to making our world a better place, right? So for me, it all symbolizes, and bow all this up with the symposium, right? It all means the same thing, that when we come to work and we show up and the things that we do, that's why I always tell people I give it 200%, right? And I give it 200% because of the people that came before me. People like, again, I talk about this at the symposium, people like Harriet Tubman, right? Who not only did she grab groups of slaves to take them to freedom, she risked her life, right?
Every day.
And every time she got you to freedom, she didn't say, all right, I'm finished, right? She turned around and said, I got to go get some more, right?
Just one more.
Just one more, right? So for me, when we think about our symposium, right, and really what it means, for me, that energy says we're doing the right thing, right? But there's always more that we can be doing, right? We want to turn that 180, right, to 360, right? And from 360 to 720, right? Because we know there are many individuals in our communities dealing with a lot. They need to hear the information that's at these symposiums. They need to have access to us. They need to have access to the organizations that we partner with at the symposium, right? But I just think for me, just overall, the symposium confirmed and affirms everything that we do and the reason why we show up every day the way that we do.
Okay. Well, coming off of that, for talking about Marylanders, when we look at the history of Maryland, we see deep-seated issues like redlining that still impact our neighborhoods today. From your perspective, you and Marquita's perspective, how do these historical barriers continue to shape the economic reality for Black Marylanders?
That's great.
I love how we both. No, 'cause it is great, and it's crazy because at our event today over at Walbrook, we talked about this. We talked about redlining and how we're still seeing the impacts today, and how a systemic barrier, racism, will always be in effect to today, right? But it takes us and the resources for us to break those barriers down so that our future, like you were speaking of, like the Harriet Tubmans that were risking their lives, didn't even see the future yet,
Right.
but is trying to make it bright for the next generation. And that's exactly what we're still trying to do. But I told you a fun fact about redlining, and I wrote it down, so I want to share it with you as well, Cleveland. So I was reading, let's see, where is it at? I was reading off of the University of Maryland Department of English. Mia Benitez published something in 2022 about redlining and its contribution to tree inequity in low-income neighborhoods. And basically, redlining didn't just dictate who got a loan, it dictated the physical environment of where neighborhoods were developing, right? And the impact of that today, we see a direct correlation between formerly redlined neighborhoods in Baltimore specifically and urban heat islands. These areas can be significantly hotter than our neighboring green suburban areas, so like the counties and therefore. But that leads to higher utility bills and higher rates of chronic illness like asthma because of what the trees produce and the shadowing that they cause to cool off areas. So when you don't have those, you are now seeing like higher bills, and our people are struggling with that, right? So seeing that something so long ago, not even so long ago, but something like that can still have such a major impact in our communities today within the redlining zones.
And it was crazy because I told Marquita, I was like, that's so funny. She told me that fact yesterday. And then I was talking to some people today and they were like, my BGE bill is so high. And I'm like, don't you live in the city? And then she was like, yeah. And I said, that is crazy because I just found out that sometimes those bills will be like, they're like a lot for city, Baltimore City at least. I live in the county and I'm happy with my BGE bill.
Yeah, they
can't
high.
complain.
But I mean, going off of that, housing, right? Like our Black communities were declined for the loans, right? They weren't able to have the access like their counterparts were gaining. So we're seeing now that generational wealth of housing and owning homes and passing that down to their kin, or even helping them with, going to college, or helping them with their first house. We're not seeing that. They don't have access to that because of what they were denied years ago. So I think like that's really a big one that stands out to me, the impact that we're seeing still yet today.
No, I like that, Marquita, and I think so. For many people don't realize that Baltimore was, and well, I can say was, but it still is, right?
Yeah.
The birthplace of redlining,
Yep.
right? That as much as we talk about Maryland being a more progressive state, right? You know, a lot of folks will talk about how we are really just the northernmost southern state, right?
Yeah.
And there were a tremendous number of issues here within the state, and when you think about redlining is one of them, right? And the impact on Black families, Black wealth, right? That we're still seeing today, right? So when you think about intergenerational transfers, right? It's estimated the difference between Blacks and whites is about $250 billion a year.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And
That's
part of that,
that is
and
wild
part of that
statistic.
though, right, is because, right, to what Marquita was talking about, Blacks were locked out of the home buying process previously, right? And then so if you think about it, so if you're locked out of being able to buy a home, right, white individuals and white families were able to purchase homes to little to no interest at all, right? So, your great-great-granddad may have bought a house for $9,000, right? Now that house gets appraised for $200,000 or $300,000, right? In current day, now you can use that money for, school tuition, right? You can use that house to give, your great-great-granddaughter a down payment on the home, right? You can do a whole host of things that Black families have not had access to, right? So when we talk about trying to create equity and what this looks like, we got to remember that, white individuals and white families have had years of a head start to build this wealth, accumulate this wealth, right? Have access to wealth. And when you have access to wealth, you have access to power, right? So these decisions were made strategically, right, to ensure that Black individuals and Black families had no power and no wealth, right? And we see how that's playing out in many of our communities today, right? When you think about the home appraisal issue, right? Home appraisal issues are impacting Black and brown communities, right? And we think about our state specifically is impacting Prince George's County at a high level, right? In reference to how these, we had at one point in time, Prince George's County, which at one point was the richest African-American county. Now I believe it's Charles County.
Really?
But at one point in time, it was Prince George's County, right?
I didn't know it was Charles County.
It's Charles County now.
That's where Oxon Hill
Right.
is and
Yeah.
stuff.
So
Okay.
when you think about now the fact that you have this county that has all this wealth, right? But their homes depreciate probably faster than any other county in our state, right? But why is that, right? Because again, you think about, well, who makes up the majority of the communities in Prince George's County? Black people, right? You think about where you pay higher insurance premiums, right? Baltimore City, Baltimore City, majority black city, right? So you always say it costs more to be Black in this country, right? We always talk about the Black tax and what that looks like, because that is a real thing, right? If you're in an area or a community or a zip code that is primarily minority, all of your rates are higher, right? So again, it costs you more to be a minority in this country. So it's just important as we think about redlining and the impact of it, that a lot of people talk about it in past tense, right? But many of it's still here. And you take a look at our communities and how segregated we are in Baltimore City, right? That is in large part due to redlining, right? Again, the lack of investment in some areas, right? The doubling down of investment in other areas, right? So I would say when folks talk about redlining, that redlining still exists, right? If you really want to think about redlining for me in current terms, it's just follow the money, right? See where the investments are being made, right? And I think that you will still see that, not all, right? And I think that we are trying to be more progressive and do things in a different way. But you can still see how many of the communities that have a smaller percentage of minorities are still getting more investments, right? They have access to different resources and things like that within their communities. We're still struggling with the effects that when you go to many minority communities, right? Some of the main things you see as you're riding down the street are payday cash loans, right? You see liquor stores, right? You see things that do not benefit the community, things that take away from the community, right? And you don't see these same stores and resources in other non-minority communities, right? So I say Redline is still alive and well right now, and it's important for us to continue to talk about it and to figure out how do we turn the page and create more progressive, resource abundant communities, regardless of the zip code, regardless of the makeup and the demographic of the zip code, and provide everybody, equal access to things.
Have y'all heard of the butterfly effect?
Yep.
Okay. Shout out my past supervisor, Demery Woolway. She's amazing. But she was constantly giving me just all this knowledge behind Baltimore and the like history and how it still shows up today. But the butterfly effect has always been a very big interest to me because when people talk about redlining, I feel as though they never follow up with the butterfly effect that has been. Have you heard of it?
No, I'm like, that's why I was like,
yeah,
I was waiting
I'm
for you
looking
to
at
get
your
there.
face.
Yeah, I was like,
So essentially, if you look at a map of Baltimore,
okay.
you will see where the quote unquote gentrification has begun and then where it is also expanded out and where specific communities have been pushed to certain areas. It's very, very interesting. You should definitely read more up on it. Cleveland, if you have anything else or if you know anything else about it, I don't want to speak too
we
much
actually
about
had,
it.
I want to say the butterfly effect was written by, I want to say his name was, I believe it's Dr. Thomas. Please don't hold me to that. But
Yeah,
we
I was
actually,
trying to think
we
of his
actually,
name,
we
but I
actually
didn't want to
had
say
him,
it.
we actually had him at the commission to do a presentation for staff before
Oh,
on the butterfly effect
Oh,
before,
nice.
because it's important, right? In the work that we do for folks to
yes.
kind of understand, right, what we're talking about, what we're working with, and just again, to understand history. It really puts a lot of different things in perspective, because a lot of times when folks hear redlining or whatever it might be, folks think, okay, that's just a thing of the past,
Yeah.
right? But no, it's a reality, right? And it's still when you think about the cause and effect of it, and just think about Black home ownership, right? Black home ownership right now is less than it was before the Fair Housing Act.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you. When did not low income, when did income become a protected class?
Source
2020.
of income.
Source of income.
2020.
It's something that when I was doing a little bit more research, I was like, I wonder when this became a protected class, because if we're looking to prior to 2020, now that I know, how many people were affected by not just that, but also the effects of redlining together, right? They were battling this discrimination of, oh, you have Section 8, oh, you have spousal support, oh, you have child support. That doesn't count as income. But then also tack on redlining effects to that too, right? Like, oh man, the barriers that are just constantly
piling
on to people. Yeah.
And I think then also like changing it so that it can like, it was just like what you guys were talking about, like redlining still present. It just takes a different form.
Yeah.
So then I think about that too, where it's like, okay, think we got it, and then it just takes a different form in another way, which kind of also.
Yeah,
sucks.
and that's why to your point, Gabby. That's why honestly, understanding your history is so important, right? Because we are going through some of the same things that generations before us went through. It's just called something different.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's important for us to be able to understand that. But the only way to understand that is to understand history, right? To know the issues and the concerns of generations and communities before, so that you can understand, okay, like, well, why are these different communities like this, right? Why had they been like this historically, right? When we think about how people couch source of income discrimination around what is the premise behind that, and what does that look like, and what's the effect of that, right? It's important for people to fully understand. That's why for us it's important. For me, I always say I think one of the most important units of our commission is our education outreach department, right? Because
Thank you.
that is the proactive piece that's charged with educating folks and having forums like this podcast, right, where we can engage in conversations and educate people,
Yeah.
right, simply through conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's a great point.
That is a great
I won't
point.
lie. That's a great point.
It is. It is. Our Office of Public Defender today, they were in partnership with us with the event, and they were speaking about how when people are incarcerated and they come out and they have this record now,
Yep.
and they're pushed in certain living quarters. And I was like, it even stems even further back to even how they got into the into the prison system of redlining again, right?
Yep.
They're pushed into certain neighborhoods that probably have poor education. The education system is then funneling them right into our prison system. So it goes deep. I feel like we could
Yeah.
talk about redlining
Good.
forever.
Oh yeah, no,
Um,
for sure.
We just want to tell everybody, know your history. If you don't know your history, you are bound to repeat it. So know your
Yes.
history.
Know your history.
Yeah.
So this is great because a little bit more history. We've seen some progress with the Crown Act, which protects against hair discrimination.
Yeah.
Cleveland, why are legislative wins like this so important and critical for dismantling systemic racism in the workplace today?
Great question, Marquita. And I think so when we think about legislatively, when we are able to accomplish things like the Crown Act, they're important because regardless of people's intentions, right, there needs to be some requirements, right? And there needs to be some enforcement behind those requirements. So you can have all the greatest intentions in the world, right? But if you fall short, if there's no ability to hold you accountable, right, then again, there's no enforcement mechanism, right? We live in a world where there are a number of organizations who create these DEI statements, these DEI platforms, right? But we've also seen in many of our communities and a lot of our organizations that as fast as they create these DEI initiatives and programs, they take them away,
Right.
right? But when you have legislative wins, right, now you're obligated and required to adhere to a certain standard, right? It creates a level of accountability through the enforcement mechanism, through that legislation that forces you to comply with the law. And for me, that's what's most important about those wins, because it's one thing to talk about equity, right? It's another thing to put it into law, right? And to force people to comply, whether they want to or not, right? It creates an enforcement mechanism to, again, get people on the same page, right? Because whether it's the Crown Act, whether it's source of income, whether it's pay equity, right? None of those things mean anything without the laws behind them,
Right.
right? And without the enforcement mechanism to ensure that employers are complying with the law. So that's why those wins are so important.
They are.
I think for me, with thinking about the Crown Act and thinking about those legislative wins, I also think about how that creates a lot of like cultural awareness and like more of an ability for us to have like a more open dialogue with each other about it. And I was talking to Marquita about when we were talking about the Crown Act, where I think it like lets us be able to think like, okay, no, you're not supposed to just touch people's hair, like that, and that's a thing that people have had to deal with. And now it's more of like all right, like we're talking about it, we're like, no, you don't just touch someone's hair, even though you think it's great or it's pretty. And again, I'm just saying like from what I've heard, right? But I think at least that's that open dialogue, that open conversation that we're having. Even again, still with redlining, like being able to pinpoint it and talking about it right now and saying, oh yeah, I did know that there was that liquor store there in that neighborhood, and did you notice how when we got out of that neighborhood, there was like this nice Target and this nice gym. But like I think it's just nice to have those like legislative wins, because then I think it creates more of like that sense of community as well, and being able to be open and talk about it, where you're like, I'm sure some people probably were like, I don't want to talk about it, maybe like they won't understand me, or I don't want to be that person that complains about so and so like touching my hair or questioning how I had this different hairstyle, or having to come into the workplace and having to explain like, yep, I do have something, a change in my hair. But now again, knowing that that's something that other people deal with, it's like, okay, like we're creating that dialogue. Well, this is what you might want to say now, or like kind of creating those boundaries. And I think it creates like just again more of a sense of community and awareness to be able to create boundaries, which are so important.
Yeah.
So I'd say that.
I think going off of the cultural awareness, Gabby, you had me thinking of, the Crown Act was implemented because Black women were showing up to these interviews with, I mean, look at me, everybody. My hair is massive. But going into
And gorgeous.
Thank you. But going into these interviews with their ancestral hair, right? Like
Right.
we don't just put our hair in braids to put our hair in braids, right? Like there's deeper meaning there. And even sitting in a chair of a hairstylist and getting your hair done and looking in the mirror and feeling beautiful, and then showing up to a workplace but then being degraded and looked over because of specifically your traits that you can't even control.
Right.
But also are meant to be praised. So going off of that cultural awareness, Gabby, it made me think of that. I was like getting really riled up in my own head. I'm like, yes.
But shout out to my big hair as well. And everybody can see all my big hair, but it's invisible, but it's there.
Not invisible. Very
Supposedly he goes to the barbershop like twice a week.
That's hilarious. Well, it's not just enough to name the problems. We have to talk about the solutions. So I know Cleveland and MCCR have been going up and down to Annapolis these past few weeks. What's going on with that? What is MCCR hoping to accomplish for our legislative bills this year, and what can we look forward to in the year of 2026? Hopefully, at least.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gabby. And first, I want to give a shout out to our general counsel, Glendora Hughes.
Again, Ms. G.
And my special assistant, Spencer Dove, who served as
Amazing.
our legislative liaison for
Yes.
our agency. And our job really every year is to really scour all of the bills that are being introduced to really understand any of those that are going to be impacting civil rights, and to determine what's going to be our position relative to those bills and that legislation. But this year in particular, our agency is sponsoring departmental bill, right? To add education to our area of authority. Right now, when we think about educational institutions, the only level of authority that we have is in the employment context.
Right.
Right. We want to ensure that our students, one of our most vulnerable populations, can go to school safely, right? Not be discriminated against, right? And they have some area and opportunity for redress to any issues that they're having, right? So for me, this started back in 2015 and 2016 when my own son encountered some issues with the private school here, right? During the time, I was the deputy director at that time, and I felt handcuffed, right? That our agency had no oversight over it. None of our local agencies had oversight over it. And that really wasn't much we can do. So I made a promise to him that he would never have to worry about that again, right? And students that look like him would never have to worry about that again. Now, it's taken me 10 years to be able to bring that to fruition, right? But I will say that the bill that we have, and that's House Bill 649, for those that want to follow along and research it, right? Which is Advancing Equity and Educational Opportunities in Maryland Act. And it's really to make sure that we're protecting our students, right? That our students have the opportunity and have an option, a state level option, if they feel like they've been discriminated against, they can file a complaint with our agency. It doesn't take away any of the authority from the Maryland State Department of Education, but it does provide additional state level relief and opportunity to file complaints, because right now we can't depend on the federal Office of Civil Rights, right? We know that that particular office is significantly reduced, and the level of response with them is non-existent at now, to say it at best. And we want to make sure that our students aren't impacted by that. So we are hopeful that we are able to get the bill past the finish line.
Okay.
We know how difficult legislation can be, but even if we don't get it passed this year, right, we'll just bring it back again next year until we are able to get it through the finish line.
Yeah.
And with that, I also do want to highlight Monique Dixon with the University of Maryland. She was instrumental in crafting this bill and getting the language that we needed in the bill, making sure that we were aware of some of the comments and the feedback from other partner organizations to make sure we included the right language in this bill. We are proud of it, but we just want to make sure that our students go to school and they can focus on their education alone, right? No students should be treated differently because they're Black, because they're female, because they're a member of the LGBTQ community, because they have a disability, right? We want to make sure that our kids have an opportunity to go to school and only have to focus on getting their education. And we believe that this bill kind of enforces that and highlights that and ensures that as we continue to move forward.
Right.
So I know things might change, but as far as what we're looking at for this, is this for K through 12 students?
Great question. It is all educational institutions.
So even college,
right, and higher ed as well.
Okay.
Right. We believe that we want to protect all of our students. So if you're a student, you should be protected. If you're a student, you should have an opportunity to file a complaint, have it investigated, and have it resolved. So whether you're in pre-K or whether you're a junior in college, right, we want to make sure in our state that the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, one, that we see you, right, and two, that we're going to do our job to protect you while you're in class.
I love that.
Yeah.
There was two things that I just took from hearing your first part that I need the audience to really hone in on these principles. Is one, Cleveland mentioned how it's taken 10 years, the slow progress.
Yes. I
Just
thought that
because
too.
it's slow progress doesn't mean that it's denied progress, right?
Yeah.
Like it is progress. And two was, even if we get a no this year, we're coming back next year.
Yeah.
Something that I always tell myself is like, a no doesn't mean no. It's just no for right now.
Yeah.
But always continue to come back and thrive for better and do better so that you can eventually get that yes. So thank you. I appreciated that. I hope the audience does too.
So I think, when we think about like looking forward to 2026 and beyond, and what does that mean for us? What does that mean for our state? I know many folks saw on the news that our governor and lieutenant governor have officially signed up and signed off on their reelection, right? And on the same day, right, the state of Maryland filed a lawsuit against ICE, to block the construction of a federal immigration detention center in Washington County, right? So we have, and I get it, right? We don't want to make, obviously, our podcast a political podcast, right? But I think that one of the things that we will never discount is acknowledging the Moore Miller administration and what they've done for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and the fact that under this administration, our agency has increased by 30%. They've consistently invested in the work that we do, recognizing the times that we're in, the importance of our work, right? So we are, as an agency, going to continue to support the people that support us, and the people, more importantly, that support civil rights enforcement. So we are looking forward to their run for re-election. So we are looking forward to just, things coming down the pipe, right? And I think for me, I know one of the things I didn't mention at the symposium is that when you take a look at what our agency looks like, right? The fact that, just take a look at our podcast, right? That I'm quite older than you all, right? But what I see this as, honestly, is an opportunity for us to pass the baton, right? That you all are going to be the future civil rights leaders and carry this movement forward to make sure that we continue to make this state the best state to live in, right? So I am excited about all of the opportunity that we have, just taking a look at how we are transitioning as an agency with younger staff, newer people, and the possibilities that presents for our agency, I think, are endless. So I am excited about what the future will bring for all of us.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I'm so sorry.
I was going to say, Cleveland loves to throw an age in there every time he can.
So
You
how much
threw an
older
age.
I am?
Yeah, you threw an
know,
age
but I'm
like
just-
twice last time too.
we've got to acknowledge it, right? Because not in a bad way,
Yeah.
right? Because I think what we can always do better as a community is saying that we've got to ensure that from generation to generation, we are educating and developing the next group of civil rights leaders, right? So that means there's always going to be an older person in the room, which means it should always be a younger person in the room because they both bring value.
Yeah.
Right? The value that you all bring is seeing the world today for what it is, right? The value that I bring is seeing the world for what it was, right? And understanding the history, right? And it's my job to be able to educate you all on that, right? So that you all can then take a look at that, understand that, right? And then use that in terms of how you operate in today's world, right? That's important, right? It's important for us to be able to pass the baton to other people to understand, look, all you have to know, all of the work that was done for you to sit in the positions that you sit in to truly understand the importance of them, right? So we all bring value. Value is always done in different ways, right? And we all bring different value, but it's still value.
Yeah.
I think Cleveland brings up his age, so he'd be like, "You don't look older than us at all."
I absolutely look older than you. I definitely don't do it. I definitely don't do it for that.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
What gave it away?
Yeah. That was hilarious.
Oh man.
Well, that's funny. I will
Yeah.
say with the news of Governor Westmore and Lieutenant Governor Runa Miller when they filed that lawsuit against the ICE against ICE being able to construct a detention center. I was like, oh, and it was also during the month of like Bad Bunny and Benito Bull, and I was like, a win for the Latino community, another win for this month. You know,
And I also think we got to acknowledge too, right? Shout out to the Attorney General's office, right? The Attorney General's office has been filing a number of lawsuits to protect the citizens of our state, right? Whether it's against ICE, whether it's against policies and practices of this administration. So I also just want to make sure we highlight, Attorney General Anthony Brown's office and all of the hard work that they're doing, specifically around when I think about their civil rights division headed by Jonathan Smith. They've been great partners. They continue to be great partners, and they just continue to do great work. So I do want to make sure we highlight them too.
Yeah.
shout out to them.
Yep.
Getting things done.
Yes, a lot of things done.
Yes. Well, y'all, I'm looking at the time and we are near the end of our time, but also it's so sad to say we're at the end of Black History Month.
Yes.
But we all know Black excellence does not stop in one
Black
month.
history is 365.
Right.
What you talking about?
Right, nothing to be sad of. Marquita, wipe your tears. So So just a few things that MCCR had going on during this month. We want to let y'all know because we also would love for you all to follow us on social media. This is the best way that you're going to be able to figure out what we're doing, where we're at, the events that we hold. We had a collaboration with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission where our executive director, Cleveland, and Chad Lassiter and Dr. LaDawn Robinson had a fireside chat in regards to civil rights then, now, and forever. Extremely powerful. It's actually still on YouTube. So if you're interested, please go check it out. Modern Day Martin event that we held
was
for the
great.
first
That
time.
was great.
It was great. We did an internal Modern Day Martin event for our agency where we highlighted and recognized those in our agency that embody and embed in their work the values and principles that Dr. Martin Luther King left for us. So shout out to MCCR on that. And then our colleagues, Devin and Cleveland, went to the Anne Arundel County Standing Together Against Hate conference, which was very powerful. Devin gave us a really good recap. Devin also had the privilege of speaking about knowing your rights at the Black Men's Exchange. Yeah, Black Men's Exchange at their Black Soul Brunch. That was also very powerful.
Shout out to Devin.
Shout
Shout
out,
out
yeah, because
Devin.
Devin has
Devin.
been moving.
Yes.
Oh, Devin.
Yes.
And then, of course, our amazing Protecting Civil Rights During Challenging Times Symposium, where we saw 180 people show up for their community and to better grasp what's going on in our country and how they can stand up for civil rights. And then today we had our Conversations in Cinemas showing Becoming Thurgood in partnership with the Office of the Public Defender and the Enoch Pratt Free Library down at the Walbrook branch, which was very powerful. We got to meet community where they were, like we were talking about before, but also showcasing one of our civil rights leaders that was born and raised here in Baltimore. So that's some things that MCCR had going on this month. We hope that y'all tune into our social media so that you can find out what we're doing for the rest of the year.
Come stalk us, please.
Yes, please join our listserv. Go onto our website, mccr.maryland.gov, and scroll on down to that. I believe it's yellow, the yellow button where it says join list, and join our listserv so you can definitely stay up to date. And I'll pass it over to Gabby so she can tell you a little bit more.
Yes. So with that being said, again, for our commission, if you feel as though you've been discriminated against based off your protected class, or you know someone who has been, please go file a complaint on our website at mccr.maryland.gov. I also encourage others to go on our website as well just to get more information. Shout out to Spencer, who has been working on our website and making it so much more user-friendly, and just a really good website. I've been on it and I'm like, ooh, this is fancy. So please go on our website to file a complaint, or if you have other questions, you can give us a call at 410-767-8600, and you'll be in contact with the intake department and they can answer your questions.
Sounds good. And remember, folks, Black history is American history, right? Until next time, this is our Let's Talk Civilly podcast. Please make sure you tune in, follow us, reach out to us. We look forward to seeing you all next time.
Bye.
Perfect.